the same name. I'm a junior. I'm Julius Harper Jr., right? And so my dad worked in ad sales in the entertainment industry. So it turned out when I applied at the Walt Disney Company for like a low-level coordinator position, it wasn't even like anything related to TV or really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be at Disney. I applied for a position at Radio Disney. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. I was like, it's Disney. I'm gonna get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
Turned out someone who was reviewing the stacks of resumes knew my dad, worked for my dad years ago, saw the name Julius Harper at the top of the resume and went, oh, that's his son. Passed it over to another group and I got an interview.
Wow.
So
but
God, right?
Yeah.
So from there, I got into the interview, spoke with the people, and they were like, well, nice young African-American man here, seems to be highly, he went to USC. There's not a lot of Black folk here. Let's hire him. And I was like, I'll take it. Absolutely. I don't care. And that was my first step into the industry. And so from there, I did absolutely nothing related to entertainment for the next 2 years. I was working on the radiodisney.com website, helping to put together promotional images. I learned how to work Photoshop. I was programming web pages and stuff like that, but I was in, right? From that point forward, I started to look for opportunities for the next step. Like, well, how do I get closer to the story? How do I get closer to people who work with the story? 2 years in, an opportunity came up at Disney Channel. They were saying, we're going to start a new kids network called Disney XD that will point to boys content. Because Disney is, I don't know if folks are aware, Disney Channel as a network skews very girl. Like the majority of their audience is girls. A lot of the Disney Channel stars that you would have seen over the past 10 years are girls. And they were trying to make a play for the boys audience. And so they created this thing called Disney XD, and they needed to staff it up with executives. And so I put my hat in the ring, and thankfully by then I'd shown the folks that I had worked with that I could be very dedicated to my craft. If they gave me whatever assignment, I would do it, or I would figure out how to do it, right? And I would move forward from there. And so they said, well, Julius is a reliable worker, we'll give him a shot. And so I jumped in there, and then I moved again, a little bit closer to story, but not in a straight line. The position that they had was for a junior games producer. And I said, well, I'm pretty good with computers, and I had been working at, Radio Disney on the website. So I knew a little bit about, again, this is Flash programming and stuff like that, which is old technology. And I got in there and I figured out what they needed. And yet again, I had that same instinct of like, well, how do I inject story into this? And so I started to put together games that were built around original stories. So I would take the television shows that they had on air, and I would watch them and understand them, and then I would say, well, what if this happened, right? And then I turned that into a game that you would play. And it was extremely successful because
but Julius, you didn't train for this.
No, I just
you went to school for creative writing and business, but
I didn't train for it at all. No.
Yeah.
That's the thing that, like, I guess I never looked at it as a job in front of me as something where it was like, and maybe this is not the right way to think about it, am I qualified for it or not? I always looked at like, how do I figure it out? Like, what do I need to learn?
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of like just on the job training, and just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was also, again, blessed and lucky. This was a long time ago. I know I don't look that old, but like,
you really don't, Julius, because we're trying to do math in our head.
Then I appear. I'm not going to tell you how, but I'm older
than
That's
okay. We respect.
I mean, if y'all know Macromedia Flash, it's like that's early 2000s. Like, okay, it was a while back. But at that time, it wasn't as, I guess, what's the word I'm trying to figure out? There wasn't a path.
Crowded.
it wasn't as crowded and there wasn't a path. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it is now. I've gone to some events where they do things like they interview young kids out of college, you know, and you'll be talking
Yeah.
to people and they'll be like, I programmed 6 apps by the time I was 7. And I was like,
Yeah.
I
Right.
knew
It was a
how to
bit
use
of
Excel
open
by the
field.
time I
Yeah.
graduated college. Like that was
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
But because it wasn't defined, there was a lot of flexibility
Yep.
because especially in the entertainment industry, things move slow. The processes don't change that fast. Like you see
That's
now
interesting.
streaming is like destroying the entire industry and redefining everything. They saw they saw the writing on the wall with streaming 12 years ago. And they said, we're just going to ignore it because whatever. And then they literally allowed Netflix to like eat their lunch because the industry moves real quick. But if you're a nimble person will jump in and say, I'll figure it out, they gave you a shot. And that's the way I was able to kind of do it. It was just a bit of like, I don't know, a little bit of false confidence. And then like, okay, let me do my homework after the fact and figure it out. And it worked. And that's been kind of the engine that I've used to kind of drive my career. But I'm still, again, I haven't even gotten to the storytelling part. This was just, I'm making games for Disney Channel shows, you know, to go on your iPhone and stuff like that. And that was fine or whichever.
So when did that happen?
When did the switch over finally happen?
Yeah. What did that look like?
Yeah. So this was maybe another piece of advice that I could put at, yes, you know, say yes to the job and try new things and put yourself out there, because you'll find that you can do more than you realize, but also don't stay too long. This was a mistake that I made. So while I was at Disney, I figured out that I was good at this game thing, and I started to get promotions and I started to get team members put underneath me. And I was like, hey, I'm at a well-known studio making content. This feels good, but it was never what I wanted, right? And I don't know if y'all can see, my thing is mirrored, so bear with me. But if you see that little brown square right there, that brown square, that little wooden square on my shelf back there,
we see it.
That's my plaque that says, congratulations on 10 magical years.
Wow.
To which I was like,
they have ears on it and stuff. Were you at Disney?
A little bit, yeah. And like, I got those too. They got me a special pair. And I was like, I need to get out of here. I can't believe that I've been in this role for 10 years. Yeah. Oh no, what has happened, right?
Right.
Now I wish I could say that at that moment I decided to take the plunge and I quit my career at Disney and I, you know, did the brave thing. No, I sat there for another 3. I collected my long-term incentives. I got comfortable until one day, as I mentioned, Disney's kind of ignoring the whole Netflix situation, or just the whole streaming situation, resulted in Netflix eating their lunch. And that started to happen in a very literal way when Netflix started poaching executives off of their team. And suddenly a whole bunch of Disney channels.
How You Like Me Now, yeah.
Started disappearing real fast. And then the ones that were left behind were like, it's time to renegotiate our contracts. And so people started getting paid. And I was right below that level. I wasn't yet at a creative executive level, and I was still on the wrong side of the business. I was in game. Because I was that guy who was always pushing story, I ended up making a lot of connections with people inside of Disney who were on the creative exec side. And I said to them, like, I want to write. And I would show them my scripts and things like this. And they would be like, you're a pretty good writer. You should give this a shot. And I was like, okay. But the thing that was holding me back is when you're working at a company as an employee, you're not allowed to shop your stuff around, and they own you and they own your ideas essentially, right? So I was very much stuck. So anyways, the 10-year thing happened. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at this. The 10-year thing happened. And then everybody started getting, again, these calls from Netflix. And then one day my phone rang. And I was like, And Netflix was like, hey, a lot of these executives that we hired said that you're the guy that is like half creative and half like games technical. Well,
That's
we're
good.
working on this new interactive story project over here. Do you wanna come talk to us? And I said, I'll be right there. And so I went over and I spoke to them about it. And again, it was like, it's one of those but God situations. That just came out of left field one day. I almost thought it
Wow.
was a practical joke when the phone came out. I nearly said to the person, like, where's Ashton?
Wow.
Like, I didn't think about it at all. And so I went over there and spoke with them. And within about a month, they were like, hey, Julius, come over, be a creative executive on Netflix and help us build our interactive strategy, because you're the only
Wow.
person in the industry that we can find that
Wow.
knows interactive and storytelling.
Wow.
So of course, so again, I did not bravely leave Disney. Netflix put a fat stack of money in front of me and said, help us build our strategy. And I said, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I got to that point in my career. So for everybody in the room, again, like, my story is crazy. I didn't plan it. But it's not all just like from glory to glory, because I had a real bad time at Netflix. It was really rough. So I went over there and I very quickly realized that there were holes in my knowledge of what I needed to do. I mean, yes, I did have the whole, like, I built games. I knew how to translate, television properties into games and make them fun. And so I had a certain edge. But the thing that I didn't have versus other creative executives at Netflix was a decade of experience taking pitches for TV shows, right? And knowing all of the people in the industry who were coming up with ideas and having my pulse on the creative community. I was just this guy who had kind of hacked my way in through a side door, right? So I didn't have a great time. And I don't want to go into all the details, but I'll give you the
Sure.
summary version of it. So the person who hired me was soon after let go. I was transferred over into another team that did not hire me. Don't think that they really wanted this brother. They didn't understand how I worked. And I lasted there about 10 months until one Monday morning, my new boss rolled in and said, today's your last day. And I was like,
ouch.
Oh no. So this was not a fun time. Now, they didn't have a problem taking my entire interactive strategy and rolling with that. And by the way, something interactive on Netflix. But well,
you're that guy. No. We give credit where credit is due.
That's
the
fine.
guy.
Netflix was also very generous when they let people go. So I didn't have to immediately get a job. And for the first time in my career, I had now amassed all of these connections and had all of these particular experiences. And I said to myself, well, what do I really want to do? And I still had that same feeling that I had since junior high of I want to write stories. So I said, well, now's the time to go. I'm gonna make it or I'm gonna fail. So I sat down, I started to put together some pitches on ideas that I had had. I knew how to format them because by then I essentially knew how to
see them
together.
Yeah.
I knew what made good ones or bad ones, all that sort of stuff. And I went back to Disney and I said, hey, I don't want to go and make games for you. I have an idea for a show. And because I had been there for so long and people knew me, they were like, sure, yeah, we'll take your pitch. And I was like, okay, that was the grace to get into the room, but you have to bring it once you get there. So I worked really, really hard to put together a pitch for a preschool show, actually inspired by my daughter. And I put everything that I could into it. And I brought it back to Disney. And I remember it was a Thursday. You're never supposed to pitch at night when people are at the end of the day, when people are tired. Never pitch at the end of the day.
That's
never
a
pitch
tip.
at the end of the day. Never pitch before lunchtime when people are hungry. I'm just being real, like, because
that's good.
But I was like, I'll take the slot. It was the end of the day, not the best time. And I pitched them on this preschool show. And It was like 10 minutes in and out, short and sweet. And at the end of it, there was silence in the room. And I was like, what do you guys think? And they were like, this was an amazing pitch. And I was like, cool, you're gonna buy it? And they're like, we'll let you know. And I was like, all right, I guess it didn't land. So I immediately went back and started calling up my next set of connections. I went over to Mattel, I talked to Cartoon Network, I talked to Nickelodeon. I just drove around in my car, set my own meetings, and just went to pitch to people. On my way to Mattel, I get a phone call from the GM of Disney Junior saying, we want to buy that. Oh, okay. maybe I can do this writing thing. Maybe I can do this story thing.
Wow.
A couple months later, Imagination Entertainment reached out and said, we have a book we're looking for passes on. Would you like to do a take? Put together something, closed another development deal. But my favorite part of the story was, so after I started to get a little bit of validation of like, oh, maybe this is a possibility, and the money from Netflix had not yet run out.
Right. Because you're in between gigs.
I sold the concept without representation. Yes. There's a saying that I've heard: you get your first 2 jobs before you get reps. And so the way that this works is essentially networking. Even though I spent that 10 years at Disney and I was very like kind of sad when I got that plaque, the benefit was that I had met so many people in the industry who then spread to other places, and they would still take my call while I was there. So networking was the way that I was able to kind of close that gap, even though I hadn't intentionally gone to Disney thinking I'm going to network with everyone. And then one day I'll tell my show, I was like, I just need to be close to it. That was my only pre-planning and my only logic. But my favorite part of the story is that after all this stuff went down, it is not usual business. I would say that, well, I shouldn't say it's usual. Lots of people sell based on who they know and the connections that they have. Lots of people say, I have an uncle or a friend who's in the business, and they managed to take a pitch, and stuff like that happens. The majority of business that happens in the industry are people that have already sold stuff. And when you start to sell things, you have to beat away representation with the stick. Because in my particular path, even though I had spent all that time at Disney, I immediately reached out directly to agents and managers. And I was like, please, here's my script. And they were like, yeah, this is okay. Yeah, it's whatever. And so you have doubt. You're like, oh, well, if I was an amazing writer, people would be fighting over me. What I found out later is half the people don't read your stuff because they don't have time. What agents and managers are looking for is, what is the shortest path to me getting 10% of your 10% commission? It's just a very real thing. So what ended up happening is, after I made those first 2 sales by myself, suddenly I had multiple calls, people saying like, hey, we want to rep you, right? And which was a very confusing time for me, because at the first moment it was like, it's very validating. Suddenly people want you. But then at that moment, the most important thing, and I remember somebody told me this, I won't say the name of the first agency that reached out, because you never want to poo-poo anyone, but I was super excited that they reached out. And then someone else in the industry said, no, don't ever go for representation unless that representation can represent you better than you can represent yourself. And I was like, oh, I hear you, I understand. So people will just sometimes tell you the reputation of people in the industry. So I held back. Later on, a much bigger agency reached out, and then I was able to negotiate a good kind of settlement. But it was hard to say no to that first one, because the first person that says yes to you, you want to be like, all right, this is it, right? But what's really happening on the other side is agents and managers are looking at you and saying, how quickly are you going to be able to generate some funds for my business, right? So the turning point for me, and my favorite part of the whole Netflix chapter of the story, was after all this went down, I got those 2 shows in development. Netflix called back again and said, can you help us write an interactive project, please? And I was like,
Yes, yes, yes. Wow.
but it actually ended up being better because before I was an executive, I was giving notes,
Yeah,
giving the pitches. It's like being a backup dancer. You're sitting there and you're
yeah,
like, ooh, like you're so
yeah,
close. It's right
yeah.
there, but you're not the one doing the writing. I
Okay,
left, and then they were like, can you write this? And I
right.
talked to my
I'm
agent.
creative. Right. Oh, oh, you see how he did that? You see how he did that? Wow.
So, like again, it's a but God situation. Did not plan it all, did not see it coming, but it all worked out, thankfully, in the end. Um,
Wow.
so I would say that, I have that thing. It's not a straight line. It's
Hmm.
not something that you plan out. All you have to do, I think, in the entertainment industry is work on your craft, work on your connections,
Mm.
um, and then just don't stop. Because eventually, if you keep putting out better and better work, letting people read it, you're always going to come across people that are not going to respond to it. It's not their thing. Don't take it personal. It's a numbers game. As long as you are getting better, you're getting closer to your goal. Eventually, you're going to find your people. You're going to find those folks that want to connect with you.
Hmm.
Um, and then if you can last long enough, and if you can put enough work into it, you'll end up in a situation where you'll find people that will not only be your allies, um, but who will understand what you are about and will
Hmm.
help you better represent yourself to the larger world. And that ended up being the team that actually I'm working with now. But it took me, that's the wrong side again. It took me years and years and years and years,
Hmm.
to even get to the point where now I'm staffing on a new show. And
Hmm.
that was the thing that I would have wanted to do out of college, or even before. I would have skipped college and just have gone straight there. Right.
Hmm.
So I can't recommend like, hey, everyone, do like what I did, because I had no idea what I was doing
So valuable.
and it took a long time. But
Yeah,
there were little tidbits that I learned along the way that were
yeah.
helpful. So that's kind of the story of me. Hope that's helpful.
Wow, that's amazing and so encouraging. I hope folks are feeling encouraged. It is not a straight line. You did not go to school to be a gamer.
Mhm.
They fired you and then they asked you to
And
do the
I
whole thing.
had to come back, and I was like, that was the
So
thing
it's,
where I was like, clearly, it's because you can't make sense of that at all.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? So
yeah. What I'm gonna ask just 2 more questions. I see Alejandra had a question about your writing. You know,
sure.
like still, what is the how is your writing? How have you gotten support for your writing if you've needed it or not?
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, I forget my question. But my question is around like, what do you do? Like right now, are you like an independent producer and you have different projects at different studios? What does
Yeah.
a life in the day look like? You're staffing up for one project. What kind of people are you looking for? Like, bring us into your
Yeah.
world a bit for today.
So about a year ago, I started a small LLC production studio. It's just a one person. It's just essentially me. And so instead of going to now sit at any one studio as an employee, I enter into business relationships with whether it's DreamWorks, Disney, Imagination, whichever, and I loan out my creative services, whether
Mhm,
it's writing, whether it's providing notes, or if I'm
mhm,
doing production work, because
mhm,
sometimes folks will reach out and they want to, like, I've had Facebook reach out and say like, we need some help with some interactive storytelling stuff,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
So that goes essentially through my company. I do
mhm.
right now, since it's just a small thing, like I've got like 4 or 5 contracts, I do them myself, but I
Mhm.
kind of work for me,
Right.
essentially, right? And then my agents help me find new work, and they help me negotiate favorable terms in terms of like,
Mhm,
what kind of credits are you going to get, or what does the rate look like, and things like that.
Mhm.
And now I'm busier than I've ever been, but I also have more flexibility than I ever had before, because I'm not,
Love it. Love it.
it's just like I work when I want to, I get the work done. I have deadlines and stuff like that, but I very
Mhm.
much manage my own schedule. I
Mhm.
work from home literally in this
Mhm.
office pretty much all
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
With the pandemic, everything has been kind of 90% Zoom. I work
Mhm.
primarily in animation,
Mhm.
which again, another but God situation, right? When the pandemic started, a lot of live action productions started to slow down because of, you've got COVID protocols and what's going on. And when like everything was shut down for almost a year. And even now,
Mhm.
very,
Yeah.
very, right? Animation didn't really experience that. Animation
Mm.
realized like, this is all post-production anyways. The writers get to work at home, the
That's
story
right.
work from, and everything just became remote. So
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
anything, the amount of work on the animation side really started to expand quite a
Mhm.
bit. And I would say in concert with what's happening with the streaming wars, it's probably one of the best times in the industry to be an independent producer, because there are just so many buyers and there's so much
Mhm.
content. Um,
Right.
it's unreal. It's really
Is your
crazy.
is your focus mainly still with children's content?
Mostly with children content. I would say my particular sensibility is not necessarily preschool kids, but most of the connections that I have, again, are from Disney Junior and from Disney
Mhm.
Channel, and even
Mhm.
Netflix was Kids and Family, which goes up to
Mhm.
about 6 to 11, at
Mhm.
the top.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that, you know, again, I'm Mr. Flexible. So like if someone were to say like, hey, we want you to write, you know, an action adventure movie, I would be like, absolutely sure. But
Mhm.
your ability to kind of put your creative out is modulated by your network, by the people that you know.
Mhm.
Just most of the people that I know are in the kids content space. And so I've
Mhm.
leveraged that, as much as I can. But
Mhm.
that's not to say you guys might not see in a couple years, a Julius Harper production that might be something else.
Yeah. Deidre is gearing up for a meeting tomorrow with Disney about his comic and gaming work to get into that
Mm.
space. Always concerned about how much of a production should I have in hand for animation or for games, and do you take consulting for first-time creators? Deidre, is that clear to you, Julius?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So what's the nature
Sure.
of that meeting
Yeah.
having with Disney? Is it a general? Is it a particular pitch? Are you focusing primarily on, like you have this comic that you want to have adapted into either a TV show or a movie? Just want to get a little bit more clarity on this specifics.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much again. I appreciate the opportunity. Tomorrow at 6, I have a meeting with.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, I know.
okay, that's a good start. So yeah, I feel like all this, is very much connected. But long and short, I've had some animation work that's been optioned before, but hasn't made it through the pipeline.
Mm,
The idea is to create an animation studio that does a lot of this gaming and inclusive work here in Atlanta.
mm,
But at the same time, had sent this information out and had reached out to want to connect. So it's one of those of show me what you got, right? And it's the idea of haven't I've completed some games and done some short work for Adult Swim, but
mm.
don't have like a trailer pitch or something like this, and going to places like Kid Screen where it's the very random way to meet some of these parts.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of exactly how little or how much I should have in hand. My idea was just not embarrass myself enough to not be emailed, to get blocked. So that's all I had going into today. Really, really
You're gonna
honest,
do
honest.
great.
So to that, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not sure,
No,
Julius,
for
help him
sure.
prepared enough
out.
for these
Help
pitches.
him out. Help him
Yeah.
out.
So I would say so you have both comics and games. Or so are you going in to just kind of show your portfolio of different IP that you're working with? Or are you coming in to share with him a particular comic idea? But you said it's like it feels more like a general meeting than a formalized pitch. I would say.
Exactly.
So with cool guy, he's very laid back. I would say don't overdo it when trying to share a whole lot of stuff. A big mistake that I see that a lot of people make during pitches is they'll come in and they'll have like, here is the golden egg, right? And part of that will be like, here's the pitch, and here's what season 1 is, and here's what season 2 is, and oh, here's what the toys will look like, and here's the game part, and oh, it's going to be an online RPG, and here what the franchise opportunities are. And I've never seen a pitch, and again, I know you're not doing a formalized pitch, but if it goes there, I've never seen a pitch where someone walked in and said the phrase franchise opportunities, or wanted to talk about the toy line,
Yeah.
or said, and I've got a great video game idea attached to it. I've never, ever, ever seen it work. And the reason why is because when you're pitching to somebody at a major studio, all they're looking for is to feel something. That's the thing. They just want you to give them a story that surprises them, makes them laugh, makes them think. That's it. If you can make that littlest bit of an emotional connection, that is your goal. So I would say in your case, if it's just an introductory meeting with your goal is to really just to like let him know. And again, I would say this to anyone, let him know that you're not crazy. Because there are a lot of people who will come into those rooms and they'll just be like, ooh, oh, okay.
Well, that's good. Yeah, yeah.
Just, it's so
That's
important to
great.
be a cool person that he feels comfortable around. And then if you get into the space of being able to pitch a story, just focus on having him feel something. Because the truth of the matter is 99 out of 100 pitches, they don't even land on that. And I think what sometimes people do is then, because they're not so confident that, and again, how could you be? Everybody's got different tastes, right? They're not so confident that the story is enough to connect with a person, that they feel a pressure to kind of like, well, let's put on all these other stuff and show you how it's going to work for the business. And the pitch is just like, I'm coming in here and I want you to feel something about the story, right? And preferably something that, you know, that doesn't feel like, oh, this is Gumball, or this is another version of Phineas. It's like, oh, I never, like that's, leave them a little bit hungry, but like that's your entire goal. Don't overdo it. I've seen so many people that have, you know, come in with dioramas and like, I've got my visual aids. And it's like, if you draw and you got a couple cool drawings, or you have a couple cool frames from your comic that you want to show, absolutely, like that's fine. But don't pull out the easel. Don't, you know, hold on, let me get my Spotify together, I'm going to put music to, like, none of like those are the worst pitches that I've ever seen. And not just me, it's like the executives, you know, behind the scenes will talk about that sort of stuff, where it's just like, yeah, man, once you got the Spotify playlist out, we knew it was crap, right?
Right.
It's
Wow.
it's story time. Like, you have 5 minutes to make me feel. Otherwise, I might even mentally be there, but I will be emotionally and professionally checked out. And like that's the harsh reality. And I know that the executives that I've known previously, and having been one on the other side and had that kind of like, we would leave a pitch meeting and we would be like, so I just kind of put that out there as a little bit of like a peek behind the curtain when you're thinking about who you're pitching to.
Wow.
The conversation has been great, and I'm hearing the nonlinear nature of it all.
Yep.
But as I kind of reflect on it, like the USC, that's a big name. If you want to do things in entertainment, your dad kind of in the business, you acknowledging and identifying your passion for writing very early on. So I'm wondering if your path, or rather your understanding of it, did it only emerge in hindsight? Like, was everything a like, how did I get here? Oh, well, now that I think about it, that makes sense kind of moment? Or were there real moments where you felt a strong sense of knowing how it would all come together? And I ask because my life right now kind of feels like an episode of Chopped. Like there's a bunch of ingredients on the table and I have no idea what dish I'm supposed to be making based on what's in front of me.
Yeah,
Fair.
no,
Fair
I
point.
think that's super fair. And I relate to that on a spiritual level. I really do. A lot of what I've talked about is the nonlinear nature came to me after the fact. The only thing that I had always really focused on is I knew I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to, my dream was always written by Julius Harper. I wanted to see that in the credits. That was
Love
always my
it.
goal. That was always my thing. The how and where and all that sort of stuff was all very flexible. And yeah, it's a lot about the various ingredients that are in the space, but it's impossible to plan. It just really is. There were times in my career where I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this work. I remember I was maybe 7 years into Disney, and I was having kind of like my run up to when I finally got the big plaque. And I was just like, oh man. But I was in that mode, feeling that way more and more over the course of 3 years. And I said, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to put together a pilot. It's going to be the best pilot that I know how to write. It's going to be a concept that I really love, and I'm going to flex and leverage everything I possibly can to see if I can get some form of representation. And I hit that in the off time, right? Outside of work, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and put it out there. And the timing wasn't right. That was the point in my career where I was reaching out to agents and stuff, and they were like, pass, or hey, what's up? And then ghosted. And I was working as hard as I can, and I was trying to control it in a certain way, and it just didn't happen. Now, by the way, I kept those scripts and I shared them with my representation that I have now, and they think the scripts are awesome. I hadn't updated a lot of those since then. So that goes
Right.
against this subjective nature and who you're talking to and timing and stuff like that. But when it finally popped off, I had absolutely no idea, and I didn't know where it was going. The only thing that I stuck with is I had a general idea of where I wanted to land. And it was written by Julius Harper in those credits.
Yep.
That's what I
We
wanted.
see it. We see it. We see it. We see it.
So I have my one question, but now is it Dedrin's question and Dean's question? Now I have a 3-part question. So my first one, this is, I think, the follow-up to Dedrin or Deidrin's question. I love how you said leave them a little bit hungry. And so I'm trying to figure out what's the sweet spot in a pitch, right? And how do you give them enough to make them feel something and think something? And the other question to that is the intellectual property rights. So are you giving your story away to somebody you don't know? How does that part work? I'm gonna throw them all at you, and in the nonlinear way you can make a connection. So that's one area. And so one question is also for people who have multiple ingredients, but this is not their field. So I'm an educator, I'm an academic, that kind of thing. What advice for people who have some ideas, but it's a big departure for them? But my real question that I was gonna ask was about Black liberation content and the responsibility as a Black creative. Do you feel I just want to hear a little bit more about the content of your stories, if it's disrupting the dominant narratives, if you feel you can be true to yourself, or if you feel pressure. So any of those 3, feel free to jump in on them. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
for sure. So I picked up a
questions.
couple. There was how to make them feel, how much, right? Do you tell, are you giving away IP when you make a deal? Speaking to
Make a pitch.
To the chopped piece, for people who are not in the field, any advice there? And then speaking to the Black liberation and the sense of responsibility, do I feel it? The answer is yes, but I'll take them in 1 through 4. So how to make an executive feel. So that it's a tricky one because know your audience plays very important. So when you're about to meet with someone in the industry, do your homework. Look them up on LinkedIn, check out IMDb, see if they produce stuff. You will often find that executives, themselves might have had a previous stint as a writer or an actor or sometimes an investment banker, all this kind of stuff would be very surprising. These are all great points to know who you're pitching to. Once you have that bit of information, you tailor your pitch in a way that is your best guess of how to get through to that particular person. It could be a difference in emphasis, or you might even make a couple adjustments to your story turn, depending on who you pitch to. It's just always know your audience. To the piece of how much do you tell them to make them feel? So the real answer is you need to know your story backwards and forwards. You need to know the overall arc. You need to know the themes. You need to be able to understand the characters and answer any questions on what the executives may ask you. So the thing that makes pitches hard is that you have to do, I've heard it's kind of compared to an accordion. You take a small idea, you blow it up big, and then you have to take it back down to something really small. In the room, you want to be able to get across your main idea and the reason, the feeling in 5 minutes. To the how piece, it all depends on what the specific idea is. Some pitches are about transformation, right? A character becoming something else, or a particular insight on life, or sometimes it's a joke, something funny, a funny insight that you might have that you could base an entire world or story on. Whether it's that transformation, whether it's a joke, whether it's that insight, whether it's whatever that piece of you that is the reason why you told this story, you gotta that you have to be able to get that across at minimum in 5 minutes. To leave them wanting more, once you get to the very last step of the arc, stop. See if they're engaged. See if they'll ask the question, what happens next? And then that's the part. A lot of creatives might have a good idea, but they don't benefit from the skill in the telling. They'll be like, I got everything, here it is. And then you'll get down to the pitch and it'll be like, blah! And it's like, you gotta pace it out and then wait to that very last bit. Like the Prestige, it's like a magic trick, right? When you get down to that last piece and this is what makes it special. You hold on that moment, you demonstrate mastery. That's the thing. You don't just immediately give it out, because that's how you show them that you know how to tell a good story. You know where they're at, and you know that they want it. And
So helpful.
People who can do that in a room, that's magic. Lots of people can tell a story, but the ability to pull that trick off that is the Prestige. That's the thing. To the IP question, giving away IP. No. So when you come in with an original IP and you pitch it, the studios are generally looking for something called an option. An option is basically an agreement between you and the studio that says, all right, you're not going to take this IP and sell it to a competitor for a period of about 1 year. Sometimes you'll see 3 months, 6 months, but it's a standard of about 1 year. If a studio likes their idea, they will give you an option agreement that will lay out, essentially, you agree not to sell this to anyone. You will work with us on developing this idea, which basically means you give them the right to give you notes, and then to help take this like 1-pager or whatever it is and turn it into a show or series Bible, which is a thing that outlines essentially who are the characters, what's the world. Here are several springboards, which are like real small sample stories. What are the themes and what are the character designs? It's basically a blueprint for what the TV show would look like based off of the IP, the pitch that you came to in the room. You do not sell them the IP. You're basically allowing them to rent it. There will be, if you see an option agreement that says something to the effect of like, you surrender all rights to us, run away. That is not a legitimate option agreement, and no studio should be putting that in front of you. It is a time-limited agreement not to sell the IP to someone else. So you're not giving it away. That said, if you go through the development period and it gets greenlit, they're going to hit you with another contract, and they're going to be like, all right, we need to talk about how we're going to divide this up, because they're now looking at this as something that they can start to make millions of dollars off of, as opposed to just like a cool idea. To the chopped question, For folks who are not in the field, advice: make friends with people in the field. There are so many creatives who literally come out of, I keep saying investment banking for some reason, because it just seems to be the most distant thing from creative, but I'm sure there's creativity in investment banking, something. But like, people come from all over. You will find folks who have had a secret passion for writing, who are mechanics, plumbers, and they get into the industry and they make it work. But the bridge is, you have to make connections with people who are in the industry. You have to find a friend who works in the industry and be like, yo, be honest, tell me, is this garbage? Give me notes. And then you got to listen to what they have to say. Even if you don't agree, every note that you get is a tool for you. The way that I think about it is, notes are not telling you what's wrong with your story. Notes are telling you what did not connect for that individual person. A note can't tell you how to fix a story, but a note can tell you that something didn't connect. It's like an electric circuit, right? If all the wires aren't hooked up, the light bulb's not going to turn on, right? For some people, it might turn on, but if a person says, I didn't quite get this, you don't have to take their advice for fixing it, but it is an indication that there's something subterranean that you might want to look at that is not connecting there. To the Black liberation question, absolutely feel a big responsibility. A lot of this, I guess, the language around how to describe these ideas is a bit new to me, but the way that I think about that is, I'm very much interested in finding ways and places to celebrate and demonstrate, I guess, Black humanity or Black heroes in a positive light, because I've just seen so much stuff on TV where it's just like, again, really? And I have it's very strange, but I have a gold standard that I really, really like. And it's probably a show that y'all have never even paid attention to because it's old. Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The father-son relationship between Benjamin Sisko and Jake Sisko makes me cry. That is
Gold standard.
It is like, why are we not celebrating this? And so whenever I can find some of that positive Black energy that I can essentially put in whatever project that I'm working on, I'm all about that, because for me, stuff like that is formative, especially if you're working kids content. You know for sure that the messages that you're putting out there are having impacts on little minds. So responsibility is probably one of the biggest things on my mind when dealing with kids content overall, is because I want to be thoughtful and careful, but also put good and like edifying ideas out there into the content. So
gosh, what a blessing to know you. You are welcome here. So thank you for all that you shared, like gems, dropping the gems. And we also want you to know that we are rooting for you. We see the credit written by Julius Harper, and we are your family, your lily pad, your place to land as well, because the resonance, the values are all there. So we appreciate you, and folks are just giving you much love and appreciation in the chat for coming by, for sharing, for being real, for being encouraging, all the things that we needed. You have given us that medicine. Thank y'all for coming through. Beautiful ventures, writing and thriving.